So now we're going to talk about section 8.3, which is dealing with entry and exit decisions in the long run. Entry is when the firms enter the industry in response to increased industry profits. So a company, they may decide that they want to enter when there is an increase in industry profits. And another way that you can say that is you could say that in a competitive market, profits are a red cape that incites businesses to charge. And if a business is making a profit in a short run, it has an incentive to expand existing factories or to build new ones. And so that would be entry. Now, an exit is a long-term process of reducing production in response to a sustained pattern of losses. And that would be losses are a black thundercloud that causes businesses to flee. If a business is making losses in a short run, it will either keep limping along or just shut down. Depending upon whether its revenues are covering its variable costs. But in the long run, firms that are facing losses will end up having to cease production altogether. The long run process of reducing production in response to a sustained pattern of loss is called an exit. There's a section in here, and then we'll look at talking about long-term equilibrium. We'll look at that. But there's a section in here on page 204. It's talking about why do firms cease to exist? And can we say anything about what causes a firm to exit an industry? Profits are a measure that determines whether a business stays operating or not. Individuals start businesses with the purpose of making profit. They invest their money, time, effort, and many other resources to produce or sell something that they hope will give them something in return. Unfortunately, not all businesses are successful, and many new startups soon realize that their business venture must eventually end. In a model of perfectly competitive firms, those that consistently cannot make money will exit, which is a nice, bloodless word for a more painful process. When a business fails, after all, workers lose their jobs, investors lose their money, and owners and managers can lose their dreams. Many businesses fail. The U.S. Small Business Administration indicates that in 2011, 534,907 new firms entered and 575,691 firms failed. Sometimes a business fails due to poor management or workers who are not very productive or because of tough domestic and foreign competition. Businesses also fail for a variety of causes. For example, conditions of supply and demand in the market may shift in an unexpected way so that prices that a business charges for outputs fall and the prices of inputs rise. With millions of businesses in the U.S. economy, even a small fraction of them failing may affect many people, and business failures can be very hard on the workers and managers directly involved. However, from the standpoint of the overall economic system, business exits are sometimes a necessary evil if a market-oriented system is going to offer a flexible mechanism for satisfying customers, keeping costs low, and inventing new products. Okay, so we know that no perfectly competitive firm acting alone can affect the market price. However, the combination of many firms entering or exiting the market will affect overall supply and demand in the market, or affect overall supply in the market. In turn, a shift in supply for the market as a whole will affect the market price. Entry and exit to and from the market can be a driving force behind a process that, in the long run, pushes the price down to minimum average total cost so that all firms are earning a zero profit. To understand how short-term profits for a perfectly competitive firm will evaporate in the long run, imagine the following situation. The market in a long-run equilibrium where all firms earn zero economic profit, producing the output level where P equals MR equals MC and P equals AC. No firm has the incentive to enter or leave the market because obviously if they're not earning a profit, then companies are not going to be looking to want to expand or want to enter the market if there are no profits to be made. And so let's say that the product's demand increases, and with that, the market price was to go up. The existing firms in the industry are now facing higher price than before, so they will increase production to the new output level where P equals MR equals C. This will temporarily make the market price rise above the minimum point on the average cost curve, and therefore, the existing firms in the market would now be earning economic profits. However, these economic profits attract other firms to enter the market. Entry of many new firms causes the market supply curve to shift to the right because it would increase it. As the supply curve shifts to the right, the market price would then start to decrease because now there's more supply, so prices would decrease. And what this would do then is the economic profits would fall for new and existing firms. As long as there are still profits in the market, entry will continue to shift supply to the right. This will stop whenever the market price is driven down to the zero profit level, where no firm is earning economic profits. Short run losses will fade away by reversing this process. Say that the firm, so we see that. So long-term adjustment and industry types. So whenever there are expansions in an industry, costs of production for the existing and new firms could either stay the same, increase, or even decrease. Therefore, we can characterize a firm as either being a constant cost industry, a increasing cost industry, or a decreasing cost industry. And we'll look at this a little bit more specifically. But in a constant cost industry, whenever there is an increase in market demand and price, then the supply curve shifts to the right when new firms entry and stops at the point where the new long-run equilibrium intersects at the same market price as before. This is a case of constant returns to scale, which we discussed earlier in the chapter on production cost and industry structure. However, why will cost remain the same? In this type of industry, the supply curve is very elastic. Firms can either supply any quantity that consumers demand. In addition, there is a perfectly elastic supply of inputs. Firms can easily increase their demand for employees, for example, with no increase in wages. Tying in to our bring it home discussion, an increased demand for ethanol in recent years has caused the demand for corn to increase. Consistently, many farmers switched from growing wheat to growing corn. Agricultural markets are generally good examples of constant cost industries. And we see that. And they also get a lot of farm subsidies as well. But that's why a lot of the farmers, instead of growing wheat, they've then decided to grow corn. And if you notice now, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon. In fact, I filled up and got gas today. Gasoline now is well over almost 5.60 a gallon. But ethanol, E85, which is 85% ethanol, which is made from corn, alcohol from corn, and only certain vehicles that are called flex fuel are able to burn E85. And so both of my cars are not capable of using E85, unfortunately. They It's like $2.50, $2.60 a gallon right now. So it's like about half of what um, gasoline is. But again, only certain vehicles can burn it. But obviously, too, a lot of that is it's taxed differently as well. The difference in the price. But again, there's there's only just certain gas stations. This gas station that we go to just happens. It's like the only one. Um, just kind of interesting. It's actually the only one that sells E85, but around here. But they do that. Um, but again, there's a lot of them have switched to that, and so a lot of the corn, that's what it's used for. But that's made because of the demand for it, that's what's made a lot of the farmers to grow it. So an increasing cost industry, as the market expands, the old and new firms experience increases in their cost of production, which makes the new zero profit level intersect at a higher price than before. Here, companies um, may have to deal with limited input, such as skilled labor. And the demand for those workers rises, wages are going to rise, and this increases the cost of production for all firms. The industry supply curve in this type of industry is more inelastic. So it's one where, for example, requires an increasing cost industry. It's one where it requires laborers that have certain skill level. And so obviously, if we're expanding in that, then those people are going to become in shorter supply. Now, for a decreasing cost industry, as the market expands, the old and new firms experience lower cost of production, which makes the new zero profit level intersect at a lower point than before. In this case, the industry and all of the firms in it are experiencing falling average total costs. This could be due to an improvement in technology in the entire industry or an increase in the education of the workers. High-tech industries may be a good example of decreasing cost market. So we see here the different charts for that. So in A, demand is increased and the supply has met it. Notice that the supply increase is equal to the demand increase. The result is that the equilibrium price stays the same as quantity sold increases. Now, in B, we notice that sellers were not able to increase the supply as much as the demand. And so some inputs were scarce or wages were rising. And so the equilibrium price, that is going to rise. And then in C, sellers easily increase supply in response to the demand increase. Here, new technology or economies of scale caused the large increase in supply and the equilibrium price declines.